Shama. What's up, my Slazas? Hear me and rejoice, for the pay-per-view drought is coming to an end. That's right, our suffering has ended. Coming up next month, October, us UFC fans have been graciously blessed with not just one, but two pay-per-view cards. Before we talk about that, I want to take a step aside here for a moment. Make sure you guys who aren't subscribed to the channel take a moment to hit that subscribe button. We surpassed 100 subscribers, and I am so appreciative of each and every one of you who took the time to subscribe. Moving on, we have some bangers to discuss. The meat and potatoes of this video is about the event kickstarting off October, UFC 320. We are eating good with this card. 2 championship fights and some banger feature fights. Listen, my hunger for a banger pay-per-view event has been growing. After the Canelo vs. Crawford snooze fest, yes, snooze fest, that card was underwhelming compared to my expectations. Come on, no finishes on the entire main card? Not even an exciting jump off the couch moment like a knockdown? Some of the fights had their moments, like the main event in which Terence Crawford threw some hands on Canelo and definitely hit his flow state out there. But man, the lack of finishes on the main card is just so disappointing. Perhaps I have become too spoiled. After all, MMA has been feeding me well recently. Although it definitely has its boring moments, MMA has been force-feeding us entertaining finishes recently. Look at Diego Lopez versus Gene Silva for an example. A fight that turned out to be an execution live on TV. Diego Lopez put Gene Silva down like he was a rabid dog. By the way, I did correctly predict Diego Lopez to win. Diego Lopez opened up a portal to Agartha for Gene Silva in the middle of that octagon. Seriously, Diego vanquished Silva to the Shadow Realm. That fight had so much blood. It was so nasty. Anyways, I digress. Do not let these fight night cards distract you from the fact that we have not had a pay-per-view in over a month. And like I said, my hunger is at an all-time peak. My MMA Dark Passenger has been itching for a solid pay-per-view, and oh boy, the fights in October could scratch that itch. I've hyped it up enough. Let's talk about the fights on UFC 320. We all saw what happened in their first fight. Alex Pereira lost his belt to Magomed Ankalaev in a shameful decision. Alex Pereira came out in the beginning of the fight, blasting Ankalaev's legs with low kicks. Pereira had his flashy moments, head kicks, punch combos, and still imposed his will, while Ankalaev just smothered him with the takedown threats, cage wrestling, and clinches. Although it was extremely boring to see that fight style out of Ankalaev, it worked, as he won the fight by unanimous decision and became the new champion. By the end of the first fight, many people claimed that Alex Pereira didn't look like himself, leaving many to question his drive. Furthermore, since the fight, Pereira's online presence has shifted to him promoting his lavish lifestyle. Expensive cars, movie roles, vacations, leaving many to wonder if Alex Pereira still has that drive and that hunger that once propelled him to the top of 2 UFC weight divisions. Whereas on the other hand, Big Ank has been eerily silent. Ankalaev doesn't post on social media much and has secluded himself back to Dagestan. Big Ank is plotting something. He's the quietest one in the room, doesn't reveal much about himself, and you know he's training hard in secret. He really is an evil henchman away in Dagestan, plotting his grand evil master plan for domination of the UFC. Coming into this rematch, there's a lot of dynamics to consider. Let's talk about Alex Pereira first. Alex Pereira is this guy who has achieved some of the highest highs in the UFC in the shortest amount of time. He defeated the arguable middleweight GOAT and rival Izzy Adesanya to become the middleweight champion. He then moved up to light heavyweight and beat 3 former champions along his quest of becoming light heavyweight champion. Not to mention, Pereira did all of this in less than 4 years. This guy is so good, man. He has that one-shot KO power that can easily put your lights out. He's fought some of the current best competition in the UFC and walked out on top. He truly is elite. However, his kryptonite seems to be Magomed Ankalaev. How good is Big Ank? Magomed Ankalaev has been a dark horse in this division for a while now. Ankalaev has only lost once in his career, to Paul Craig of all people, and since that loss he has not looked back. Ankalaev has that really good Dagestani wrestling style, and not too many people know this, but Ankalaev has some really underrated striking as well. People forget, man. Big Ank trains rusty kickboxing with Lucas Tracy and eats from the Real Food Cookbook. He's kind of a marauder. All jokes aside, how do I think this rematch is going to go? I'm going to go psychic right now. And I'm going to say that Pereira makes the necessary adjustments and gets it back in blood. Give me Pereira by knockout. However, that being said, there's a lot of adjustments Pereira needs to make. First of all, the only way I see Pereira winning this fight is by knockout. There is no way on the face of the earth that Alex Pereira submits Ankalaev, and if the fight goes to decision, I see it going in favor of Ankalaev. However, Ankalaev has a big weakness that Pereira needs to exploit in this fight. Looking at Ankalaev's career, he hasn't really fought an elite level striker before, except for Alex Pereira in their first fight. Nobody good has really been able to check Ankalaev's chin, and we've seen Ankalaev get uncomfortable from leg kicks before. And now, you may be thinking, well, Pereira tried to strike and kick with Ankalaev before, and look at how that went. Okay, nerd, you might be right, and I'll give you this. Magomed Ankalaev was better than Alex Pereira on that night. However, I think a lot of people who jump shit from Pereira to Ankalaev are forgetting who Alex Pereira is, man. All that Pereira needs is one confident shot to put him down. Like I said before, nobody good has really tested Ankalaev's chin. But if I were a betting man, I don't think it could take a full force punch from the man with hands of stone. That being said, I think Pereira was humiliated from his loss. Although he is getting older, 38 is nothing in light heavyweight years, and Alex Pereira still 100% has that dog in him. I think his loss to Ankalaev exposed to him some holes in his game, and I think he's smart enough to realize that. Coming into this rematch, I can see Pereira making the needed adjustments, coming back from that adversity, and beating Magomed Ankalaev by knockout. Before we talk about Merab Dvalishvili versus Cory Sandhagen, let's take a step aside here for a moment. Can we all appreciate how good of a fighter Merab is? This upcoming fight against Sandhagen is going to be his third title defense in under a year. You rarely see your favorite fighter fighting 3 times a year, unless you're a Kevin Holland fan like me. Let alone, you rarely see a champion fighting 3 times a year. Merab is truly a fighter who fights for the love of the game, and easily the most entertaining champion right now, simply due to his activity. Not only is Merab on his 3rd title defense this year, but he has publicly vocalized that if he beats Sandhagen without significant injury, he wants to get a 4th title defense in before the end of the year. That's crazy. This guy really is a machine. Moving on past the Merab glaze, let's talk about his upcoming matchup against Cory Sandhagen. Champion Merab Dvalishvili will defend his belt against number 4 ranked Cory Sandhagen in the co-main event of UFC 320. His opponent, Cory Sandhagen, is getting this title shot after his win versus former flyweight champion Deiveson Figueiredo. Sandhagen is getting the title shot off this 1-win streak, which may seem odd, but in the context of the division makes sense. Merab has cleared through his division, beating Sean O'Malley twice, Umar Nurmagomedov, Henry Cejudo, Petr Yan, and Jose Aldo. So it's not too far off for Merab to be fighting the number 4 contender who's on a 1-fight win streak. There's not too many other people in the division for him to fight who he hasn't already beat. Let's talk about Cory Sandhagen. Sandhagen has some good wins under his belt, such as Figgy, Chito Vera, Song Yadong, Frankie Edgar, and more. Sandhagen has some good skills under his belt, he's got really good BJJ, and has a unique knockout power for his division. While Sandhagen is good, he's not an elite level fighter or former champion. Sandhagen fought for the interim belt once before against Petr Yan, where he lost. It might seem like I'm kind of dogging on Sandhagen here, but I actually really like Sandhagen as a fighter. Sandhagen's got some really funny skits. If you haven't seen them before, look up Cory Sandhagen on YouTube or Instagram Reels. Sandhagen's kind of like the Lil Dicky of the UFC. But anyways, enough about Sandhagen. Let's talk about the champion. Merab is on track to becoming the GOAT right now. As I previously mentioned, he has 4 former champions under his belt, 5 if you want to count it each win against O'Malley separately, and some really high-level wins. Not only does Merab have so many wins over champions, but he does so dominantly. This guy has some of, if not the highest level of wrestling in the UFC right now, and the best cardio we've ever seen in the UFC, and an insanely overwhelming pressure fighting game. Merab ragdolls some of the most elite bantamweights ever, and hardly even breaks a sweat doing so. Even against some of the other best wrestlers in the UFC, such as Umar Nurmagomedov and Henry Cejudo, Merab is able to out-wrestle them simply due to his never-ending gas tank. This guy is just so good. And if you thought Sandhagen is funny, Merab is also hilarious. Merab emotes on his opponents in fights, often showboating on his opponent. Merab is also one of the highest pound-for-pound comedians in the UFC. If you thought Sandhagen has good skits, Merab posts some hilarious stuff on his Instagram. Enough jokes aside, who do I think is going to win this fight? My bet is on Merab. I think Merab is going to do what he does best, and that's break down his opponent round by round. If I had to say, although Merab has developed his submission skills at 34, I think he's probably going to beat Sandhagen by decision. If Sandhagen is to beat Merab, he has to do it by knockout or decision. And let's be real, Merab has an iron chin and elite cardio for recovery. I don't see Sandhagen KOing him. Like I said, Sandhagen has really good jiu-jitsu, and the submission threat is there, but I just don't see it happening. To be real, I don't see Merab submitting Sandhagen either. You can't be called a submission expert after submitting Sean O'Malley. I know people who submit Sean O'Malley. He's not the best grappler in the UFC. If this fight goes to a decision, it is absolutely in Merab's favor, and that's my pick for this fight. Jiri Prochazka versus Khalil Rountree is such a banger! This is one of the best fights the UFC has made this year, and it's not even the main event. This fight has potential to be fight of the year, and that's saying a lot. Joshua Van versus Brandon Royval, which I consider to be fight of the year, was an absolute barn burner. Dana absolutely cooked with Jiri versus Rountree, which is probably the number one contenders matchup. I say probably because Dominic Reyes versus Carlos Ulberg has the potential to be the number one contender match, but to be real, it just depends on how both of these fights end. Khalil Rountree's lore runs deep. At age 19, Rountree used to weigh over 300 pounds, and after a health scare, decided to turn his life around and found his calling through MMA. Rountree took a 2-year trip to Thailand to learn Muay Thai, where he reinvented his striking and became one of the most dangerous strikers in the light heavyweight division. People forget, man, Khalil Rountree beats people like Batman. Khalil Rountree is also part of the Choice Center cult, the same cult that Dominic Cruz is a part of. The cult stuff makes you wonder how dangerous is Rountree. With world-class Muay Thai and cult motivation, Khalil is here to vindicate the light heavyweight division. How good is Rountree, man? This guy, despite being on a one-fight win streak, is on the up and up right now. In his most recent fight, Rountree dominated former champion Jamal Hill. Before that, Rountree fought Alex Pereira at UFC 307, and although Khalil lost to Alex Pereira at UFC 307, his stock went up even after the loss. The reason being, Khalil Rountree fought like a legit warrior against Alex Pereira, and probably gave Pereira his hardest title defense yet. Seriously, Khalil refused to give up and fought like an absolute dog until his body could not physically take it anymore. This guy's a thug. Before his loss to Pereira, Khalil Rountree was on an impressive 5-fight win streak. Khalil bounced back from the Pereira loss with his win over Jamal Hill, and the UFC is recognizing it by giving him the former champion Jiri Prochazka. Jiri Prochazka is the Czech Republic's resident samurai. If you thought Khalil's lore was crazy, Jiri's lore is crazy. Jiri Prochazka follows the Bushido code of the samurai, wears a war braid in his hair when he fights, trains isolated deep in the forest, and that's just the tip of the iceberg. Jiri Prochazka is so odd yet so cool. Not only does he have this unique personality, but the guy can fight. Jiri was the former light heavyweight champion after he beat Glover Teixeira. Jiri, however, had to vacate the belt due to a severe shoulder injury. Before coming into the UFC, Jiri was light heavyweight champion in Rizin, which many of you might know Kaya Sakura from. Jiri is so good, man. He's got an unorthodox striking style that just works so well, with ridiculous power and some pretty good names under his belt. Jiri has only lost twice in the UFC, with both of his losses being to Alex Pereira. That's crazy. This guy has only lost to Alex Pereira in the UFC. How good is Alex Pereira, man? Coming into this fight against Khalil Rountree, Jiri Prochazka is also coming off a win over Jamal Hill, which happened at UFC 311 earlier this year. So as you can see, this fight is a blockbuster. Honestly, I wish this fight was 5 rounds so we could witness the full violence for an extra 10 minutes. But sometimes you don't need the full 5 rounds, especially when 2 of the best finishers in the division are fighting. Man, this fight's going to be good. I'm honestly more excited for this fight than the main event, and you guys are too. 56% of you guys said that this fight is the most exciting fight on UFC 320, and I have to agree with you. Like I said, this could easily be fight of the year. How do I see this fight ending? I'm going to go with Jiri Prochazka by finish. I say this for a few reasons. Firstly, both of these guys are too violent and leave it all out there when they fight. I don't realistically see this fight going to a decision. However, I do think it is possible. Secondly, I think Jiri has more of that crafty vet experience, despite being younger than Rountree. I think Jiri has fought better opponents and has better wins than Khalil. Don't get me wrong, Khalil is good, and I think this will be a super competitive fight. And to be fair, there's definitely an argument for Khalil Rountree winning this fight. When it comes down to this fight, I think Jiri has more tricks up his sleeve, more plays in his book, so to say, than Khalil Rountree. Jiri has that unique, unorthodox striking coupled with good submission game, and I think he's going to be a problem for Khalil Rountree. I'm not going to give a full prediction for the Ateba Gautier Ozzy Diaz fight, but what I do want to talk about is Ateba Gautier as a prospect. This fight is Ateba African Street Fighter Gautier's first fight at the top of the prelims. Actually, this fight was on the main card until the UFC added the Abus Magomedov versus Joe Pyfer fight. But you guys, we cannot let the Ateba Gautier hype train slow down. Ateba Gautier is on a roll right now and is one of my favorite prospects to watch. Ateba Gautier made his UFC debut just 3 fights ago, and since then has been on a round 1 knockout streak. These African guys are so good when they come into the UFC. Take, for example, Kamaru Usman, Israel Adesanya, Francis Ngannou, and more. Ateba Gautier is so entertaining to watch. He goes out there and fights like an absolute dog. You guys really should pay attention to his fight at UFC 320 and see what the hype train is all about. Lastly, I want to talk about the UFC Rio main event. The UFC Rio main event has been shrouded in controversy over the last few weeks. Originally, Charles Oliveira was supposed to face number 10 ranked Rafael Fiziev in the main event of UFC Rio, which I talked about in this video. However, around a week ago, Rafael Fiziev pulled out of the main event due to sustaining an injury. Since Fiziev pulled out, it was up in the air who Charles Oliveira was going to fight in this main event. Many hypothetical matchups were made by fans and fighters alike since Fiziev's cancellation was announced. Firstly, many fans speculated that BSD would step in to fight Charles Oliveira after his impressive submission win over Mauricio Rufy at UFC Paris. And I know, I picked Rufy to win that fight, but I can't always be right. Anyways, coming back to the main event of UFC Rio, Diego Lopez of all people expressed in an interview that he would be interested in stepping in to fight Charles Oliveira, which is crazy. First of all, Diego Lopez is coming off that impressive dub over Gene Silva at UFC Noche, so he's on a big hype train right now. However, what makes this proposal crazy is that Diego Lopez has never fought at lightweight before. I'm not doubting that Diego Lopez wouldn't have success at lightweight, but it would definitely be interesting to see how he fares against one of the best lightweights of all time, that being Charles Oliveira. But that question goes to the backseat now that it is confirmed that number 8 ranked Mateusz Gamrot will step in to fight Charles Oliveira. This is an interesting matchup with a lot of MMA math behind it. I know MMA math isn't accurate, but I'm still going to give you guys the rundown to give you some context for this upcoming fight. So Charles Oliveira lost to Arman Tsarukyan in a razor-close split decision back at UFC 300. Arman Tsarukyan is now the number 2 ranked lightweight contender. Gamrot beat Arman Tsarukyan by split decision on a fight night back in 2022. Charles Oliveira beat Beneil Dariush by TKO back at UFC 289, and Gamrot lost to Dariush back at UFC 280. So, by MMA math, Gamrot has a win over Charles Oliveira by way of Arman Tsarukyan, and Charles Oliveira has a win over Gamrot by way of Beneil Dariush. But we do not care about MMA math. MMA math is not a valid indicator for a fight. Do you know who gives valid indicators for fights? This guy right here. Who do I think is going to win this upcoming fight? Give me Charles Oliveira by finish. Absolute lock. Charles Oliveira is one of the best lightweights to ever do it for a reason. He has the best BJJ in the UFC with some world-class Muay Thai and some underrated wrestling. Charles Oliveira is dangerous everywhere. When it comes to Gamrot, Gamrot's good. He has some high-level wrestling in the UFC, but let's be honest. Gamrot is not on the level of Charles Oliveira. Charles Oliveira has fought some of the best competition in the UFC. Ilia Topuria, Islam Makhachev, Dustin Poirier, Justin Gaethje, just to name a few. Despite losing his most recent fight to Ilia Topuria, it isn't a bad loss, as Ilia is currently the #1 ranked pound-for-pound fighter in the world. I think Charles Oliveira has fought better competition than Gamrot. I think Charles Oliveira has better experience than Gamrot. I think Charles Oliveira has better skill than Gamrot. And I think Charles Oliveira will ultimately win this fight against Gamrot by finish. The champion has a name. That's all the picks for today's video. I want to thank you all once again for 100 subscribers. I hope you've enjoyed today's video. I know these are absolute banger picks, and if you disagree with me, not only are you wrong, but you should leave a comment explaining why you disagree with me down below. But yeah, that's going to do it for today's video. Make sure to subscribe, and until next time, peace!